Welcome to this third edition of Philosopher Roundtable. In this edition we'll discuss civilization, or methods of government, control systems, things that will, mechanisms that might help the human race find a way to live in peace, prosperity, in the general well-being, all that kind of stuff. What's the best mechanism for finding a way to actualize ourselves as individuals and get the greatest potential out of ourselves as a species, or as nations anyway? I might argue that the idea of nation states and borders is very corrosive and destructive, and that it would be my hope, if the human race was to thrive in the future, that it would find a way to get rid of those, to dispense with that nonsense, and find some system of governance that was that ensured things like fairness, that people got what they deserved, nothing else, and that our potential is maximized. I argue that the current system, democracy, is probably the only way to go. That you do try to do it with a collectivist mind, that everybody gets to say something about the system and how to improve it or how to fix it. I would argue that it might be the obligation of the intellectuals or the elites to convince the lessers, if there are such a thing, of why certain policies need to be implemented and why they should vote certain ways. And ideally you could argue that the best of us, some Einsteinian-style dictator, might be best, but you can't guarantee that. There's no such thing as blue blood, and there is no guarantee of who takes over, and there's no protections against even some sort of insanity or craziness. It's just too hard to do, too hard to trust, too hard to depend on. So the democratic system seems the only game in town, some sort of democracy. I would say the flaw in direct democracy is that laws end up being too simple, and life isn't simple. Everything's a little bit complicated, and you need people who are very well informed and who are going to do the work to be informed, to be making final determinations and judgments. And simple little, one-sentence statements, tax me less, tax them more kind of policy is sort of what you might expect from self-interested individuals who aren't very informed. So you do need a representative government, and ideally you have a government that does have checks and balances, that you might have a government with an envisioned, something like 3 branches of government, or branches of government. And so I have no real problem with having an executive that has a veto power, and a Congress that has an override power. The problem is in how the legislative bodies are elected. It's where the real problem comes in. Executives, single individuals, well, one winner takes all. Somebody's got to lose. But in legislative elections, no one should lose. They should be representative bodies. They shouldn't be representing people who didn't vote for them. That's the real nonsense of the current system. It's a holdover from 250 years ago, when it took you 4 days to travel 50 miles. Times have changed, and it's time for us to modernize our democracy. We have computers, we have lots of stuff now. There's no reason why we can't allow people to fully realize the idea of a representative, somebody who represents what they believe, what they care about. Currently the system represents your geography, because there was no other way to vote except locally. Now there's no reason why we can't have national elections, and we can't have thousands even of candidates. And so I would argue that the way to fix the democracy is to implement 2 elements. One element to get rid of the geographic bias and all the pork interest. We should be representing our ideology, not our geography, by making legislative elections open So a statewide legislature would be open to any candidate within the state. You wouldn't vote for somebody in your district, you'd vote for any candidate you wanted to. And the same with national elections for the Congress, it would be open to any candidate could run. And you could vote for a candidate from New Jersey, for a candidate in California. There would be no local jurisdiction. If you chose to vote for somebody local, that would be your right, but you wouldn't be obligated to. And basically the idea is you would have instant runoff voting, so that would be the second part implemented, and that would allow you to rank your vote. So you could vote for, say, you could list 10 candidates, and your vote would go to the first viable candidate on that list. And by computer would just use an algorithm to piece through the voting system, and eventually votes would go to nationally running candidates, and as a candidate received enough votes to get elected, that person would be elected. And then if your vote was for a candidate that's already been elected, it would go to your second choice, your third choice, your fourth choice, and so on. And there would be mechanisms to recycle votes that, like say, none of your candidates ended up being viable, where your vote would go to somebody who would vote in your interest in terms of compiling votes together to elect a candidate to represent you. So anyway, the bottom line is that all voters would have a representative, somebody they voted for, not somebody they voted against. And to give back half our population, give them back the idea of having a representative is, I think, fundamental to civilization. I've never had a congressman I voted for in my life. Never had a representative in Congress. I've had exactly the opposite, somebody I actually find repulsive and repugnant to my values and ideals, who's been calling himself my representative. And I find that even grotesquely offensive, that he would claim ownership of me when I despise everything he stands for. So yeah, we should have a system where nobody can claim they own you because you live in his district, and where your ideology is represented in Congress, not your geography. So anyway, it seems like a simple fix to our democracy problem. Sorry about the length of this video. Anything to add, though, if you have some other mechanism that might improve the democracy, or some other system of governance. Obviously you need a strong constitution, and one that's behind a firewall, requiring 2/3 votes to rewrite it. Those are all good ideas, in my opinion. Protecting basic rights, so you can protect yourself against fluctuations. I would also add that it wouldn't hurt to have, in my opinion, a third branch. The branches of government should be independent. The judiciary should not be appointed by the Democrats and the Republicans. It should be appointed by a Supreme Court that's elected. And I would argue that the Justice Department and enforcement agencies should also be a separate branch of government, with some sort of hierarchy, and they do all investigating work regarding what the FBI or CIA might be up to, and creating a balance, a check against abuses and such. So thank you. Anyone who wishes to contribute, the requirement is to put Philosopher Roundtable in the title, and would appreciate the correct volume number, and titling, I don't know the word for it, but yeah, add those numbers and such. Anyway, so till next time, thank you very much. Alright, let's go with, I guess we'll go with Mike first, and then Longcat, if they're both still playing. Need some more players.